Before we begin this debate, I want to thank everyone for coming to attend to watch this debate, and our teammates, Neil and Matt, for whatever great opposition that they have to put up for us today, and Joffer, our great judge. So as we begin, the story that we're going to tell you today is about a United States issue. But really, when it comes down to it, you have to look at it in specifics. So our plan is that New York City should should repeal its public smoking ban. And we feel that this is going to be a great policy-making decision for four main issues. So when you hear my rundown, expect four main issues. It's going to start kind of with a moralistic, and then it's going to go more into policy. So without further ado, let's begin. The main reason that you want to look at is that by obstructing public smoking to a ban, you're really limiting our First Amendment rights. That is, that we have a moral obligation to upstand our Constitution, that we have to keep this First Amendment right, because this First Amendment, that we should have the right to choose what we want to do and associate ourselves with what we want to do. There's no current laws that say that smoking is illegal, so that means that we have the right to associate ourselves with that. And by putting stipulations on that and putting laws to artificially limit our capabilities to the First Amendment, we're allowing further advocations of that, such as limits to free speech, limits to trade, and limits to ways that we can associate. If we don't protect those minority rights, we'll be back into the same societies that we came from, of destitution and no rule of law. So we have to uphold that basic idea of having minorities of all else. And later in my speech, you're going to see how this kind of weighs out on a policy-making level. So the first policy rule is that you have to look at the economy. When you look at the economy, there's a couple precedents that you want to look at. First is that we're in a recession now, and the weak economic scenarios are really limiting corporations, and by artificially putting laws that make them worse, we're preventing our economy from recovering. So there's really three main ties from this by having this public smoking ban in the status quo. The first is that restaurants will get less business in New York City, because since a restaurant is considered a public area, people will not go to those restaurants because they don't have the ability to smoke. A lot of people are addicted to smoking, so if they can't go to the restaurant and smoke there, they'll find another place to go. Maybe they'll go to Hoboken, they'll go to their own house. But that's going to limit and hurt the restaurants in New York City, which already are hard-pressed because of the weak economic scenarios, and because people's paying out only comes from when they have extra money to spend, and right now they really don't. And the other two links that you want to look into is that New York City is kind of like a center of commerce where a lot of people look at. So when we look at New York City, Chicago models New York City's policies. So when New York City was improved and they got rid of a lot of the crime, Chicago and other major cities followed. So other major cities are looking to model off of that, so that's going to hurt their restaurants. And the other aspect of it is free trade. So we're arbitrarily hurting our economy in free trade, because if you look at it, we're preventing these tobacco companies from having the ability to advertise and trade freely in this area, which is a major sponsor or mitigation to the other parts of the country. And the third impact, this is a complete other advantage, is that it's going to hurt immigration and free capital markets. So you might be thinking, oh, this is kind of a stretch, but if you think about it, a lot of cultures, such as the Middle Eastern culture, have a lot of their deals made by the use of tobacco. They use tobacco in order to kind of make their deals correctly, because they have to have trust in each other, and if they don't use the same tobacco pipes, they won't be able to trust their business partners. So if they're not able to do that in public scenarios, and likewise, Asian cultures, they use that to gain trust, they're not going to go to New York City to make these big deals. So it's going to decrease our immigration, which is pretty important to a cosmopolitan city like New York City, where almost half the population comes in for work and half leaves for work. So without that immigration, we're not going to have a strong business cycle. And like I said, we're not going to have the free capital trade because it's going to be significantly limited. And although you can say the economy is already weak now, you want to see that it's going to take a longer time to recover, and this is going to cost us millions of dollars, but at the same time it's going to cost us in our culture, and our culture is extremely valuable. It's almost as important as health, because if you look at our culture, if we have free trade of ideas and we have free trade of culture, it will allow for a healthy well-being, because a lot of culture ambiguities where people are relating to each other can be directly tied to health. And that kind of leads me into my last point of if we look at this as a broader culture perspective of the precedents of the courts, right? The precedents that we're setting, right? So if you look to the Chief Justice's recent statement that the Supreme Court does not make cost-benefit analysis, by putting in the current law that we have, we're making an artificial cost-benefit analysis. And the cost to society of that is that people can just pay to have laws happen. In other words, so you're going to say, well, maybe the public smoking ban hasn't really had these occur yet, but as you can see, it takes a little bit of time for New York to spread to Chicago, and Chicago to spread because there's a bunch of district courts, and as it takes the time, the precedence is slowly spreading. So right now we're allowing this precedence to spread that the Supreme Court can make cost-benefit analysis that if we have these certain health scenarios or we have these certain genetic scenarios, we're going to have to put in, if it's too expensive to someone's health or too expensive to someone's cost, then we're going to overweight that to our rights. So basically we're putting corporate governance above the value of our freedom of rights and our freedom of public expression. And that's why you're always going to prefer the affirmative's interpretation, because it's going to lead to this destruction of overall rights.